So we always start these things like we're confused because we have to come up with some type of idle banter to start off the episode and not an accident podcast. But we're going to get right into it because we have a lot to go over with Nick Delaney, our guest today from McLaren, Tampa Bay, part of the Dimmitt Automotive Group, and you're a sales advisor over there. So if I wasn't an attorney, I would be in exotic cars, man. I envy, and sometimes I'll stop by and say what up because I envy being in your position around all those amazing cars. So welcome, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me about, like I said, we're going to get right into it, man. Tell me how your journey started with, selling exotic cars and being around exotic cars.
So it was different for me than it is from basically everyone else I work with. I'll keep it kind of short, but I started getting into automotive stuff as a kid, but throughout high school I was doing social media for an exotic car detailing place in Rochester, New York, where there wasn't a lot of exotic cars, not like Tampa or a lot of other markets in the country where it's a common thing. And I kind of got to know some people in the community there, and they introduced me to other people, and life kind of moved on, and I moved down to Tampa to go to the University of Tampa for school. I wanted something to do my sophomore year, and ended up selling cars at CarMax on the weekend, like 3 days a week. I wasn't like all the other kids that wanted to go out and party and drink and do that. I was working, selling cars, and right before COVID hit, there was a job fair at the University of Tampa, and my professor was like, I was in a finance class, and he was like, "There's a job fair here today, guys. You guys skip class, go meet companies." And Dimmitt was there. My HR manager had an orange McLaren sitting outside, and she was kind of impressed with me, and she was like, "Well, you're a little too young and still in school to be selling, full time, but what else have you done?" And I said, "Well, I have social media experience, from my early days in high school and stuff." And they brought me in for an interview and hired me to run all the social media for Dimmitt. Toyota store, 3 Cadillac stores, an Audi store, which was good. I got a lot of experience in a different kind of dealership in different parts of the Tampa Bay area. But ultimately, I knew I wanted to stay with the ultra luxury stuff. And so after a year and a half of doing that, it was time for me to graduate school. And my managers and my boss came to me and they said, "We know you're not going to do this forever. You're not going to, make an hourly wage forever doing social media stuff. You're graduating with a business degree. What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to sell, the big stuff." And they're like, "Well, it's not always like that. And you've only had a little bit of experience, like maybe put you at the Audi store or make you a product genius." And I just fought it and proved to them that I could sell the big stuff, and brought deals in when I was doing social media. And eventually, right before I graduated, they said, "Okay, June 1st, you come in and start selling the big stuff." And it's been doing that way ever since.
When was that? 2022?
Yeah, 2021 when I graduated. So yeah, I was just turned 22 years old.
How did it feel, and that's so rare. What was the feeling, or what was the thought process that you basically stuck with your guns and was like, "This is what I want to do"? Because most people would be like, "All right, well, if I could do Audi or I could work my way up." You were like, you knew what you wanted.
Yeah. The truth of it was I needed to prove to myself that I could stay in Tampa and do this kind of thing. Because I can go sell Audis or BMWs or whatever anywhere else. But I moved to Tampa to do something different than my life was like in upstate New York. And, I'm passionate about exotic cars. I love all cars, but I'm passionate about exotic cars. And I came in with this knowledge that I didn't have to learn the product. I just knew the stuff, which helped me. And, it's not like getting a guy from an Audi store or a Maserati store where, they have the experience, but they don't have the product knowledge. And so I had that, and I needed to prove that in order to, to show them that I was capable of doing it.
How did you grow with the brand, I guess? So, and let me kind of clarify that a little bit better. So 2021, obviously McLaren had been out, and you went straight into selling McLaren. Is that correct?
I was hired as used cars.
Okay. Because you have Bentley, Rolls-Royce, McLaren. So
yeah. And so my first year was a lot of...
And Aston Martin too, right?
Aston Martin. It was a lot of used cars, selling a lot of used, not by anyone's fault, but in order to get McLaren leads generated, you have to be McLaren certified, and it took a little while for them to do that for me. And my age was kind of a setback because McLaren wouldn't let people drive their cars that are under 25 years old, and I was
Really?
22.
Okay. Okay.
So it took a little while to work with them, but ultimately I got that done. And I think I'm still the youngest McLaren certified salesperson in the country. But
I was just going to say, at one point you definitely were.
Yeah. Right now, still the youngest with Dimmitt too, which is crazy because a bunch of the guys have been in the car business longer than I've been alive, or they're twice my age, but they're still great to work with. So, but yeah, I started selling a lot of like used Porsches and Ferraris and Range Rovers and stuff that we got traded in, and then eventually a couple of people who were McLaren certified with our team left, and it opened. We needed another person, and McLaren's my favorite. I love everything I sell, but that's the passion for me.
Do you remember selling your first six-figure car? What was that experience like?
It was actually before I was officially selling cars. I was still doing social media, but we have a location in Sarasota called the Sarasota Studio. And they would let me hang out down there on Fridays and Saturdays to just kind of see what it's like, watch what goes on. And the guy down there, he doesn't work with us anymore. But he had a lot of faith in me and he was like, you know what? He goes, there was a guy that came in to look at an Aston Martin. Actually, he didn't come in to look at an Aston Martin. He came in with a Porsche Panamera Turbo, and he's like, I want a two-door car. My kids are all grown up now. I want something fast with two doors. And I'm like, well, there's a 600 horsepower Aston Martin. And he fell in love with it. And the guy I worked with, Kevin, at the time, he was like, look what he just did.
Great name, by the way. Yeah, wonderful.
Everything. But he was like, look what he just did. You know, he took this deal from start to finish without me helping, without me having to call one of you guys up as managers to get it done. He's like, you guys ought to give him a shot. And I did that a few more times down there and ultimately ended up where I am today. Do you think, I'm sure passion was a huge part of it, and we'll get back to that. How did you study or learn about the cars? And do you think, your learning curve or trying to cut your learning curve as quickly as possible helped where you are today or helped, kind of take you down the path? How I learned about them is kind of strange, but not really. I watched a lot of YouTube videos of the cars coming out.
It's not that strange these days.
No, it's not. I was never really into reading. I didn't read a lot of articles. I would when it was something specific I wanted to find out that I couldn't find from a video, but I would always have that on in the background when I was doing homework or stuff for school. And it just kind of sunk in with me that way. And so I wasn't doing it to learn about the cars because I knew I wanted to sell them. I was doing it because I was interested in them, because I liked that stuff. And so it doesn't feel like I was trying to do homework or prepare anything. It was just natural.
Doug DeMuro, Quirks and Features.
Doug DeMuro, Shmi 150, all those guys. The Smoking Tire, all
That's
those
awesome.
guys.
So you go 2021, you finally get your shot. You're in the used car world. Then you're in the process of getting McLaren certified. When do you finally start selling McLarens?
Late, like December of 21.
Okay.
Was the first new one I sold.
So, and that's when the 570s were.
They were done. It was
done. Okay.
It was just GT and 720 at that point. Arturas hadn't come out yet.
When did the 720s came out in 2021, right? The 720S?
18. 720s came out in 18.
As far as 18? Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay.
And then the Spider came out in 20.
Because I knew the MP12C was like 2012-ish.
2012.
And then the 570 was about 2016.
16 to 20. Yeah.
Okay. And then 18 and beyond was the GT and the 720. So that was you must have started getting, obviously the 570 is a great car, a lot of fun. But when the 720 came out, how did, I guess, the process change? Or because that's an amazing car.
The 720 changed the game for supercars. It gave you the performance of something like a Porsche 918 or even close to a P1. $1,000, it wasn't $1 million. And forever, and until I think really the SF90 came out, that car had a target on its back for being the best, highest performing car you could buy under $1 million. But you can drive it every day. You can do a road trip in it. We have people that put 20,000 miles on it in a year. It really redefined what a modern supercar could do. And you've seen a lot of people follow that now with the twin turbo V8s and all that stuff. Lamborghini just ditched their V10. Ferrari's back into a hybrid. So it really changed the game for what supercars were capable of.
I knew of obviously the 570 GT and the 570S, but like when I started really, I guess, noticing McLaren was like I said, when the 720 dropped, it was like, and then it was the, 765 LT, and then, the 750S and all this, and the reiterations have been just incredible. So talk to me about, because obviously talking about selling at CarMax and now in the ultra luxury world, how do you think those two worlds differ? I would imagine there's some similarities, but I imagine there's some massive differences as well.
Yeah, the fundamentals are the same of figuring out what people want, and figuring out what their hot buttons are and what they need. That's no different. There's just another zero added to the price tag of what I do now. The difference is the way the relationship with the customer. A CarMax transaction, this is not a dig against CarMax, is very transactional, like a retail store. Doing what I do now is a lot like being at like a country club. It's very relationship based. And so maybe it's not something that gets done, in a day or a week. It might take a year or two. I mean, I've known you for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It took a little while.
I think 2 years, yeah.
Before I sold you in earnest.
Yep.
It's a long game. But once you have that relationship, then it stays. It's very rarely, at least when it's a local customer, it's very rare that I see him once and never hear from him again.
Tell me about that. So how does the kind of the networking and the relationships, that was definitely going to be one of my questions, and you already hit on it, which very interested in. How does kind of I wouldn't say necessarily the procurement because the relationship is already there, but the follow-up, the growth of the relationship. Talk about that.
So there's a bunch of ways. I always stay on top of people because I love cars and love what I do. I love to hear about people's experiences with their cars, what they like, what they don't like, what they might.
It's not a transaction to you.
No, nothing makes me happier than when someone's super excited to get their new car, whether it's a used car and it's a $100,000 BMW sold or a $600,000 Rolls Royce. Makes me happy watching somebody, I help them find that. And so I love hearing about it. They're like, yeah, it was great. Like they bought the car on Friday and they're like, on Sunday I went down and met my buddies and we took the car out for a ride. And that's what I love hearing about. And then getting the people back in, bringing them back in for events. And, like when you came to Arturo Spider and came and drove the 750 and just bringing them back in. Dimit does such a great job of putting events on it because we have 4 brands. A lot of these people, this isn't their only exotic car.
No,
they've
not at
got
all.
3, 4, or 5 of these. It's not uncommon. And I've got a lot of clients who have one of every brand I sell. And so they're always being invited to stuff to come see the new Rolls Royce or to come see the new Bentley.
I just got the Toys for Tots invite, which we're excited about.
Yeah. And also, outreach, things like that for the community where that's not like a high pressure sell event. I've sold cars off of that before.
I'm sure.
It's just a great thing to be involved with, to have 100 supercars, with a police escort shutting down.
It's a
Howard
wild
Franklin Bridge.
experience.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's amazing.
That helps. It's not something that, I feel like I don't have to go out of my way to do that. It's something I'm excited to invite people to. But also reaching out through social media and stuff, just checking in on people. But I'm always on the phone calling people. I don't like sitting at my desk doing nothing. I'm pacing around the showroom on the phone, asking someone how their car is, whether they bought it, 6 days ago or a year and a half ago.
How often do you see where people know what they want versus people are like, versus maybe they don't know what they want. I guess they know the characteristics. Like, for example, you were talking about, the guy didn't say, I want this Aston Martin in this color and this spec and things like that. He was just like, yeah, I want a 2-door car. So how many people do you know that are like, or how many percentage of customers are like, I want that vehicle that you have versus, hey, just put me in something that checks these boxes?
Most of the people that say, I want that know that I want this specific thing, they're usually out-of-state people who called in, they saw the car online. And then every once in a while, you'll get somebody that wanders in. They're like, oh, I'm here to see the black 2017 911. You're like, oh, cool. Most of the time, especially when it's a new person that walks in there, like, I'm here to see McLarens. Okay, well, what do you want to spend? Do you want to spend $250? New GTS or a used 720? Or do you want to, you want to have an unlimited budget up to $500,000 because we can go there? And then you kind of whittle it down from there. And then sometimes you get people come and they're like, well, I'm looking at a Cullen or a Vantage. And I'm like, well,
they're two very different cars.
I'm like, well, one's half the money of the other, and they do two totally different things. And then I got to kind of whittle it down from there. And then they end up buying something totally different. It's a case-by-case thing. But usually it's people have kind of an idea of the car they want. Sometimes they'll come in and they're like, I want this car, this color. All right, I don't have it. Let's order it. Or let's go find one. Most of the time, people are kind of open to changing things and hearing suggestions.
What's the most expensive car you've ever sold?
Most expensive car I ever sold was new Rolls-Royce Cullinan, 571,000.
Not black badge.
It was a black badge.
Oh, it was. Okay. I was going to say it. I would figure it'd have to be. I mean, it had to
every
have
box tick.
Everything. Like, just check them all. So what was it? And going from there, what was it like having the Bugatti Super Sport in your showroom? Seeing that in person was obviously, I've seen a couple, but seeing that was, and actually being able to kind of spend a little bit of time with the car, you know, looking at it and stuff like that. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah. For me, it was like a childhood dream moment.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I haven't driven a Bugatti. I'd like to. But just having one and being like, well, I have the opportunity to sell this. And I'm sitting at my desk and I'm looking at a Bugatti, which I never thought would happen.
Oh, it's like 40 feet away, 30 feet away from you.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And it's the craziest thing. And it was like, as soon as it showed up, I took a picture and sent it to everybody. I'm like, look what's here. Which I do that sometimes when we get a really cool McLaren or Bentley or whatever. But I sent it to everybody because I was like, look how cool this is that there's a $4 million Bugatti like 20 feet from my desk.
Do you think that your experience with social media has provided you an advantage or a significant advantage with being able to sell, you know, cars and things like that?
I'm not going to say there's only two kinds of people we sell cars to, but there's a lot of, there's not old money people, but people who have had these cars for 20, 30 years, you know, Bentleys and maybe not McLarens, but Bentleys and Astons and Rolls.
Meaning they get one every couple of years?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it just, they're, you know, later in life and they're just accustomed to that. And then there's people, you know, like you and other, you know, like, and social media influencers who've got what I want to say, like new money. They want a little bit flashier. And because I see what goes on social media and because I, you know, interacted with that, I can see what triggers that. And so sometimes I'll get people in there like, hey, look, I've got this amount of spend on a car. What's going to get me the most views? What's going to draw the most attention? I'm like, well, it's probably the orange McLaren.
You're having these conversations. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
And I had a guy, I'll shout him out. His name's Jason Wojo. You can find him on
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
I sold Jason his first McLaren at
no way.
24, 25 years old.
570, right?
A white 570.
Yep.
And the car paid for itself in like 3 months.
Yep.
And he was like, well, let's do the next one. So then he bought a Range Rover. Then he bought a Bentley. Then he bought an Aston. And he's killing it. And people are like, whoa, how'd you get all these cars? And he just did a great job of that. And now he's out in Phoenix, but hopefully he'll still buy cars from me. I'll just have to put him on a truck. But yeah,
I'll send him this clip right now and be like, Jason, you better take care of our boy. So
Jason's a great guy.
No, I met him. We were out in Tampa once or whatever. I think we were at, it wasn't Franklin Manor. It was whatever it turned into after the fact or whatever. And, or it might've been, no, it was, I don't even remember what they called it next. Shame on me. But Eden, I think it was. And I saw him at the table cross and I went up to them and I was like, hey dude, I don't mean to be like a weirdo or anything, but I've been following you on social media for a minute. Like, nice to meet you and stuff like that. Yeah. Super nice dude. Super cool.
Yeah.
Guy.
He gets a lot of hate, undeserved. People are like, oh, he rents the cars. No, he doesn't.
He does not.
I sold him to him. He definitely doesn't rent the cars.
Is that a significant way to show legitimacy, I guess, on social media, in the social media business world, is to get into that game?
Kind of. There's a lot of stuff that gets faked on social media.
Of course.
Maybe not so much in the Tampa area. You see a lot of it. And I see a lot of it at the dealership too. Like sometimes people show up with like, you know, like a rental Huracan and they're like, oh, I'm thinking about trading that. I'm like, yeah, that car was here last year. It's got like the rental frame on the back of it. And then you're like, well, you know, that's going to end up all over social media.
How do you know when somebody with saying that, how do you know when somebody's showing up for a legitimate purpose? Like I'm trying to buy a car versus like somebody's trying to either get some content or is just trying to get a free test drive?
They will not ask me to drive the car if they're serious. I have to ask them to drive the car. You didn't drive your Urus before you bought it.
No, I didn't. Did I drive it?
You right before you bought it.
Did I?
Yeah, because we had already agreed on numbers. I said, no, we have to drive it.
Yeah, you were like, oh, yeah. I do remember that. You were like, we closed the deal and you were like, do you need to drive it? I was like, no, I mean, I'm good. I trust you guys and stuff like that. You know, we've known each other a long time. And you were like, no, just take the car around the block or something like that. I'm like, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I drove the car, but we already had a deal. So that's very interesting. I'm sure most people, you can kind of read it 9 times out of 10. It's like, hey, that GT3 looks great. Can we take it for a test drive? And it's like,
it's like, let's pump the brakes.
Let's
figure out some other stuff.
So how let me say this. When do you know, in the social media sense, I guess, because that's obviously the in-person, how do you know when somebody's just, blowing up your DMs to waste your time?
Because they'll usually...
I guess it's not that much time, though, or...
No, it happens where people are like, oh, I'm going to get this and get that. And I'm like, okay, let's start. Give me shoot me your driver's license. I'll put something together. And like, oh, I don't have it on me or something. And they'll give me a excuse why.
Sounds legit.
Versus sometimes where people are like, no, I want this. Like, here's the VIN for my trade. Like, let's get it all done. And that I've done deals like that over Instagram or over Facebook before. Where sometimes people, send me a Facebook message or an Instagram message. They're like, what can you do for it? I said, well, send me your driver's license. And I'll, with tax and everything, I'll show you what it's going to be out the door. I'll show you what the payments look like. And crickets.
Yeah.
So I like to put that on people to get serious right away versus some people like to play this back and forth of like,
what are you thinking? What are you looking at? It's like, hey, give me a car. I'll send you a build sheet and, let's get down to the brass tacks of it. I think that's a great way to go about it. Just get serious from the beginning. Tell me about, why do you believe that, we kind of talked about it, I guess, supercars have gotten so popular with our generation. I mean, I feel like the last 4 or 5 years, like I said, from, young business owners to influencers, do you think it's more, and I'll even go further than that, do you think it's more based on a childhood dream, or do you think it's like, okay, I'm checking a box?
I see both of it. There's a lot of people that come in there like, even older people that come in like, I've always wanted a Bentley. But then you get, younger guys that come in like, I've wanted a McLaren. Well, McLaren's only been selling cars in the U.S. for 13 years now. So, a lot of people who are like, that was their childhood dream car my age. And so sometimes you see that, and then sometimes you see it where it's the social media thing where I want the exposure and I want the content and I want, the likes and views and whatever that come from
Have you had people come in with like the full camera crew and stuff like that and do like the whole like, look guys, look at me? Well, I mean, and I like him a lot. I'm not saying anything bad, but look at Ben Malla. Yeah. I've talked to what's his name about him plenty of times.
Yeah, we've had a lot. We get that. Actually, Jason does. Jason has a camera guy that does. He does the
picking up my latest whip.
Yeah, no, and they do a great job of it.
If you're not doing your ads through me, you're never getting one of these. Yeah, no, I've seen his marketing. It's compelling.
And I sit there and I'm standing
outside
outside the shop watching it happen, and I'm like, I can't wait to see that one on Instagram.
Yeah, hate. Yeah, okay, I'll go with you. Hate. Yeah, man, it's a social media is a brutal world to say the least, and you better have some thick skin. And he seems to handle it very well. So, and one thing that I wanted to point out, and I wanted to get your opinion on as well. And we were kind of heading in that direction. Buying a exotic car or a luxury car, it's kind of, and you used the terms before, the new country club membership. I mean, there are so many people, I've been fortunate enough, my audience probably knows to, own a couple Lamborghinis. And there are so many people that I met that I met through owning that car. It's insane that I probably wouldn't have really connected with as well. From my CLA 45 days, where they used to park me in the back at DuPont in the parking lot of shame. So
yeah, and now you're a title sponsor for WaterSet.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty insane. Shout out to those guys; they do a great job and really take care of me. That was the thing, and maybe a little bit selfish, but I always love cars. I always love exotic cars, and I wanted to, when I was first going to car shows, DuPont was obviously the big one over in like St. Pete, Clearwater area. And that was the first time that I saw like a 918, I don't know if it was a 918. It was a Carrera GT. One of our mutual friends or people that we know in the area, the couple other attorneys had them. Don't want to put those guys on blast, but they have a sick collection. They had a Carrera GT. First time I saw an Aventador in person. So many rad things, and I'm like, I want to be those guys. Like, I want to be able to park in the, front lot and not turn to the back of that. And that was when Reeves was really popular as well. My poor wife showed up to Reeves one time or whatever. I think she was dropping stuff off to me, and they were like waving her out of the parking lot. She's like, I didn't know it was like that. I'm like, you're just, So I'm just kidding now. But yeah, having that access to people is amazing. And I've met so many amazing people because of ownership and my love of cars. So it's a great community to say the least, and it's blown up in Tampa. It's gotten crazy.
Yeah. It's a surreal thing, like that DuPont registry. I read DuPont registry every month as a kid. I had the subscription to it, and I remember reading about those cars and coffees. And before I worked for Dimon, when I was at UT, I would attend them just as a spectator with an Audi S4, and then reality hit for me when I was 20 years old. It was the last DuPont Cars and Coffee before COVID. And I had just started working for Dimmitt and Matt Jones, who I know.
Shout out McLaren.
Everybody
Matt.
knows Matt.
Everybody knows McLaren Matt.
Or it's Supercars and Seconds on YouTube. Yep. Who's like my best work friend now. So, but he was like, "Come on, mate, let's go. Let's take a couple cars." So we took a purple and a blue McLaren, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, "This is what I read about as a kid."
I will send you. I have a video of you guys driving by. Yeah. Was it blue with like the orange? I'll send you the video. I swear to God, I think I have the video of you guys driving by in like slow mo.
Yeah, that was the last. That was the first one I ever went to as a Dimmitt employee, and the last one DuPont Registry ever held there because they moved. Then COVID hit, and I was like, wow, I got to go to one of them driving a supercar and these things I got to read about as a kid. But now it's crazy. I mean, then the Armature Works show took off, and now the Monar Enclave, and Waterset's got their thing going on. But every weekend there's a Cars and Coffee.
Oh, with sometimes multiple.
Yeah, like this. We were just talking about it before we started this. This weekend there's like 3 of them in 2 days. Which one do you want to go to?
And one moving because the other one, because they want to get the draw and stuff like that. It's now coming to this whole logistics play. I'll tell you, at DuPont, my old boss had, I think he still has, an Aventador, and he pulled up in the Aventador, and I saw his license plate was his law firm. And I went up to him and I was like, and all through cars, probably, I don't know if I ever even would have really met him. Great guy. Went up to him and said, "Hey man, so what do you do?" He goes, "I do personal injury law." I go, "I do personal injury law." And he goes, "Oh yeah, awesome." I'm like, "I want to do it like you do it because I want that." And that's how our relationship started. And probably had 6 months or a year later, I started working for him. So yeah, I mean, that was all through the power of cars. So it's amazing to say the least, and a great group of people. What do you think about those? I guess, we can kind of say there's bad actors in every, I wouldn't say necessarily industry, but, kind of group. Why do you think these non-sanctioned events keep happening and these, knuckleheads and stuff like that? It just kills me because it just undermines the car community so much.
It's tough. It's just people getting away with things, I think. There's little consequences unless you get
takeovers
caught.
And all this. Yeah.
It's so hard when there's 250 people blocking an intersection, but you only have 3 police officers. I'm not saying the police officers.
No, of course.
But you can't, and then they can just move.
Yeah. They just go to the next spot.
And so it's like, it's happened all over the country. And fortunately, the kind of cars that I sell and the kind of clients I deal with aren't partaking in that kind of thing. But sometimes you see it. Like, I'll be going to an event with a car and someone wants to do a burnout next to me at a traffic light because they think it's cool. And they think, me driving a McLaren. And I'm like, no, I'm doing this for work. Like, I don't want to do that with you. And I'm also not impressed by that kind of thing. Because I've been, driven around by a Formula One driver before, and that was impressive.
Yeah, that's an experience.
You're doing a burnout in traffic next to me. So it's just one of those things that sucks that we have to deal with until people realize that it's just stupid. And, people have been hurt and killed at these things and they still don't realize it. So I don't understand what it's going to take for someone to realize that it's just not worth their time and that you could spend your time better. And there's places to go and do that kind of thing, like a racetrack or a skid pad, not shutting down an intersection to do that.
I've told people, and I put out a little bit of content on it, and not to use your platform or episode to say it, but, dealing with accidents on a daily basis, this is something that's so preventable. And it's like, it's sad, and I sound like an old codger, but these young people, it's like, man, you get caught with this, or you hurt somebody, or you do something, you really have no idea what kind of black mark you're putting on your life. You need to be really, really careful. And there's issues with, associating with these type of events. So when in doubt, take that type of behavior to a racetrack or some type of sanctioned event where it's safe and regulated and go ahead and have, knock yourself out and have some fun. So what advice would you give somebody looking for their first supercar, their first luxury car?
So I go through this with somebody probably once a week where somebody comes in and they've made, however they've done it, they've made a bunch of money, and they're like, well, I want a McLaren or I want an Aston Martin or whatever. And I'll have one. Let's say it's like a 5.7. It usually revolves around something like a 5.7 year Vantage. And they'll come in and they're like, all right, well, I think I want a 570. It's my first supercar and I want to build up from there. I'm like, great. I have a lot of guys that do it that way. That the 570 is a great entry point for, first supercar. They're reliable.
Yeah.
They're not that expensive to buy up front, but they also, because they've depreciated a little bit, they stay in there, and you can still get a McLaren certified, so you can get a warranty with them. And they're like, well, this place over in Miami's selling one for 25 grand less. I'm like, great. They're not a McLaren dealer. They don't have technicians that were qualified to work on that car or know what to look for. I said, and I say this to people, and it's not meant to come off rude or anything, but I'm like, go save the 20 grand, go buy that car. I will see you in 30 days or 60 days or whatever, because you bought a car that, now has a $45,000 repair bill because you didn't want to take the time to get one the right way. Whereas this is what I tell people, like, you see a 570 you can buy for 120 grand, but the ones that are McLaren certified are 145, 150 grand. Spend the extra 30. Whether that means you don't buy the car for 6 months or you got to put a little more down or your monthly payment's higher, it'll save you in the long run. But it's not just about the maintenance cost of the car. It's also, when you buy a car like that from a McLaren dealer like me, you have the chance of going, and getting a loan through McLaren Financial Services, which then allows you to build your profile with them. Then it's easier to get the next loan. And then when you want to buy a brand new McLaren, we've got a relationship with them. Whereas when you go and buy one from a back alley dealer and God knows where, you don't know what kind of bank you're going through. They may never see you again and they don't really care. Whereas when you buy it the right way, you're guaranteed to get a better value for the car when you go to trade it in. You're guaranteed to have a better ownership experience. And that's what I tell people. And most people listen to me and some people don't. And they're like, oh, I should have listened. And then they end up trading the car back in. They're like, it needs all this stuff. And I'm like, well, I told you that was going to happen, but now you're doing it the right way. So that's what I would say is, do your research and buy one from the right place, or save the money now to not spend it later by just.
Well, the big thing is too, and you kind of hit on it, was the opportunity cost. Meaning, like, okay, if you buy a car and have it for 2 months and then something major breaks and you're out of the car for 4 months and you're still making payments on it, what did you really save? You got a paperweight that's getting fixed until, things get repaired the right way. The other thing I would say, and love your opinion on, is I always tell people to get a PPI, pre-purchase inspection. How important do you think that is these days?
If you're buying
especially post-hurricane with flood vehicles and stuff.
Hopefully those get totaled out the right way. They should all have certificates.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
It's, if you're buying a car certified from a dealer, it's not
a different story.
It's different because the car's got a warranty.
I'm talking more like Facebook, mom and pop, dealer, stuff like that.
Yeah. And even if you're buying, like if you're buying a Porsche from a Benz dealer, they'll know what to look for the most part. But if it's like a GT3, I'd probably send it to get a PPI. And especially if you're buying anything exotic, Ferrari, McLaren, Bentley, Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, whatever, send it to get a PPI at the dealer. Or if there's not a dealer near you, like a specialist that specializes in that car. Because you can spend $100 grand on one of those cars maintaining it for a year if you get the wrong one.
Oh yeah.
Which, $1,000 to $2,500 on a PPI will save you. It's so important if you're buying one out of warranty, not from, the franchise dealer, that you get that done. Because I've seen it so many times where people didn't. And they're like, oh, this car's got no cats and turbos. And you're like, yeah, if you had sent it to a shop, they would have told you that, and it would have saved you from buying a new motor. So
it gets expensive quickly, to say the least. So like I said, I always tell friends, they'll send me cards and stuff like that, or they'll be like, oh, this guy has this, or this guy has that, and he's cutting me this deal. I'm like, see if they'll send it for PPI.
If it's too good to be true and it's too cheap for a reason, there is totally a reason, and you might not find out immediately. But
you got rentals, you got tracked cars, you got
mileage blockers.
Yeah, mileage blockers. You got cars that have been in accidents that haven't been reported. I mean, there's so many issues that a PPI could really save you. So I always tell people that as well. We were talking about the kind of the process of a deal and things like that. Sometimes deals don't happen, or sometimes it takes a significant period of time. So you have somebody come in, for example, they're interested in a 570S, they, come across as accredited and things like that. But they don't get you don't get the deal done then. What does the follow-up process look like in the future? Is it just kind of checking in so often? And talk to the audience about that.
It depends. So there's usually two reasons you'll miss a deal. And one of the reasons is you might not get the numbers right. And what I pride myself on is trying to squeeze every bit out of both the customer and my manager to get done. Because when you've thrown numbers back and forth with someone 2 or 3 times, there's commitment on both levels at that point. And it's really my job to mediate that and to make it work for both people. And so I try not to lose. Very rarely do I lose deals over money, at least not over, a couple $1,000s. Sometimes you'll get some person who's got unrealistic expectations about what their car's worth or what they want to pay for that car. And it's not that I don't want to get involved or do that kind of stuff, but it's like, hey, I think we just have different expectations. Maybe we find a different car, maybe a different time when, values change.
But $2,000 or $3,000 in your world is not anything to balk over on that level.
No, sometimes it's, sometimes it's just, I know the person can afford another $2,000 or $3,000. Sometimes it's just a pride thing, which is fine. You didn't get to where you got by ruthlessly spending money, so I understand it. But the other reason is sometimes it's just not the right car. Sometimes you'll get someone close on a car and they're like, I just don't love this or this about it. And then it's, okay, well, what was it missing that you wanted? Or what's the color that's the hot, button for you?
Really wanted blue versus red.
Yeah.
I really wanted a carbon diffuser or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's okay, so you want, a 4-year-old Bentley convertible white but you don't like the white and black interior, you want a white red interior. Okay. I'll let you know as soon as I get one. Or now I'm going to go try and find one. Just give me a couple of days or weeks. And so that's what it is. It's like constantly just, okay, this one didn't work. What about this one? This one? No. Okay. Well, it seems like nothing on the market's fitting what you want. Why don't you look at one of these? And sometimes I never thought about that. Well, come in and drive this. And then they end up with that one. And it's happened all the time. Another guy was a piano player. His name's Stephen Ridley. He opens for a lot of famous people and does piano stuff. And he was like, for every game, he's like, I want a McLaren. So, okay. He's like, I want a 570 Spider. I want leather interior. Kind of hard to find on a 570. I want tan leather interior. Really hard to find on a 570. So looked for weeks. I'm like, there's just not one of these on the market.
I don't even know how many I've seen.
I said, the 570 I have right now is tan interior leather.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's funny.
But we're on 2 cars since then. So I said, come look at a GT. I said, you lose the convertible, but you get a leather interior, but you have this clear glass roof. I said, just come drive it. And he did and loved it. And I was like, well, I could have saved myself 2 weeks on that. But anyways, now he's
worked out. Yeah.
Now he's bought a Ferrari from me since then. And so it's a relationship thing. Sometimes it's just not about that specific car. And you just need to put other options in front of people. Maybe not, different brand, but sometimes just a different model.
Talk about how important it is to know your clients. And you've touched on it very well, but getting to know your clients, kind of cold calling, I guess, for lack of better terms, and cold calling your clients. And the reason why I say that is, kind of some advice for the audience. So our experience was we ran into each other at a car show, and I actually originally reached out to you because I needed an SUV for the family, and you had a green G-Wagon. I was like, wasn't really in love with it. And I said I wanted a Urus, and we were at the Cars and Coffee at the Enclave. Mm-hmm. And you said to me, you're like, I got one in. And I'm like, dude, you're killing me. And you're like, it's a great deal. It's the mileage you need because I drive a lot, so I don't need a new one. And you sent it to me, and I think we had a deal in 3 hours.
Yeah, you were out by 1 o'clock.
Yeah. I was like, let me send you a VIN on what I got going, my trade-in. And so tell me how important that is, to get to know your people so those things happen.
It's learning what they like and what they don't like. Like I've got a client lives up in the Panhandle who loves red cars. Most of their collection is red. They've got 80 cars. Their Ferraris are red. Their Lambos are red. Their Maseratis are red. Their
send him a picture of that red Venador you have.
Yeah, I did. He doesn't fit in it. He came down and saw it. But anytime I get a red Bentley convertible, they don't have a Bentley, or they want a red Dawn, which I've seen a red Dawn once.
I was going to say,
no pun intended. They love convertibles. They love red cars. They also are season ticket holders for the Bucks. That's how I met them. Because they came down for a Bucks game. They're like, every time we come down for a Bucks game, we like to leave with a car. I'm like, whoa, cool.
What are there, 12 games a season? Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys are Bucks fans? You guys like Tom Brady? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, 2018 that Tom Brady had done a collaboration with Aston Martin. He was a brand ambassador for Aston Martin North America. And they made 12 TB12 Vanquishes. And we just happened to have one. One of our clients, who's a big Aston Martin collector, when the second Tom Brady got traded to the Bucs or signed to the Bucs, whatever, was like, called our Aston Martin guys, like, find me one of these cars. And we did. And then life moved on, and he was just liquidating some of his collections cars. And they're like, we'd like to have something every time we come. And I'm like, you're Bucs fans? I'm like, come look at this. And they freaked out. They're like, we're taking it back.
Was it red?
No, they were all blue, but it had TB12 in it. And
that's
they love, and it's now that's like one of their favorite cars in their collection. And the wife drives it all the time, and she's got this special memorabilia that says it's one of 12 pictures of Tom Brady on it. It's amazing. But it's just knowing things like that. That's like, that's what sets people off, is like just connecting those dots. It's like, huh. Sometimes it's like, people will be like, I love blue. And you're like, okay, I'll have this in blue. You might not think about it, but it does. Or sometimes it's like, oh, a sports team, someone will come in dressed in Bucs gear. And you're like, oh, they, look at this. It's like Buccaneers themed.
Yeah, it's orange or something. Yeah.
And so sometimes it's knowing that, and sometimes it's just knowing what people like that are like, they're like, well, when they're, in there buying a car or something, like, well, if you ever came across one of these, like, let me know. And you're like calling them, you're like, guess what just showed up? And you're like, no way. And so that's happened a few times with people where it's like, they'll just mention something that sets them off, and it's, you may not see it for a year or two, but it's just remembering that stuff. And they're like, how did you remember that? Or thanks for remembering that. And it pays off.
How is it different dealing with, obviously most of your clients are definitely wealthier. How is it different dealing with, some type of professional athlete or celebrity versus kind of the, normal business owner? Is there any significant differences that you've noticed?
It's shocking when you deal with I deal with a lot of professional athletes and some celebrities.
Between the Bucs, the Rays, the Lightning. I mean, we have our share of sports franchises. You actually get a
different kind of vibe from each one of the different sports. I won't name names. The hockey guys are really cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of them just love cars.
I met a couple of them. They're cool guys.
They love to come in and just like look at cars. And they're super nice about it. And they're very engaging. And some of them are very thankful for your time, which is really cool, because you're like, well, no, it's actually like, no, I'm honored to be standing here in front of you. And then I've had other big celebrities, again, I won't name names, who are like huge, and you're like, that's who just walked through Who just walked through the front, really? And you're like, am I like dreaming right now or something?
That's Pauly Shore.
And you're like, this is like, but they're just like normal people. They just want to be treated like normal people. And then sometimes you get people who have obviously done very well for themselves and put themselves in a position to buy cars like that, who want to be treated like the celebrity.
Really?
And it's weird. You get it. The people who want to be treated like the celebrity, why didn't you do this, or this? I'm like, well, you didn't ask. But also, we've only ever talked over the phone. I don't really know you in person. And, moving forward, we can do that. And then you get the celebrities who are like, no, treat me like normal people. They don't want any special attention. They're like, thank you for just going about your day and not like making this a big deal. And it's weird. Sometimes but then you get people who are like billionaires, who are like the most like casual, dressed down, like flip flops, Tommy Bahama shirt, like just, and you're like, you own a what? Oh, okay. And so it's just, you get a different kind of thing from everyone. Most of the people I deal with are really good people. When it comes down to it, very rarely is there someone where I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested in selling them a car again. They're usually like, especially Tampa Bay, most of the people I deal with are self-made. Whether it's professional athletes, they started their own business, they worked high up in a publicly traded company. When you make your own money that way, you're not entitled to it. You don't feel the need to treat other people like that.
I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this one. I always, you guys know, I give my guests a little bit of a heads up, but this one, just because it's such a popular subject right now, what are some of the most common objections, rather, that you deal with when it comes to selling these vehicles, and how do you deal with those objections?
Right now, the biggest objection we're dealing with is the hybridization, electrification.
Really?
Of these cars.
Okay.
So
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. Well, for two reasons. One, because electric cars, it's no secret, have started to depreciate. Shockingly, the Rolls-Royce Spectre, which is the most expensive electric car basically on sale to the general public at least, hasn't, which is surprising. And that was and I think people are starting to realize that now. A lot of people got scared. That car came out, it's a $500,000 electric car. They're like, well, that's when electric cars were really depreciated, when Elon Musk was dropping the price of the new Teslas, and you couldn't give a Tesla away, a used one at least. And everyone got scared, and it was like, everyone's like, well, these Rolls Royces are going to be worth so much less, and they're not. They've depreciated like a normal luxury car does, but they haven't like fallen out of the sky, and so people are starting to come back to that. But it's just the hybridization is the big thing that's still trying to, we have the McLaren Artura, which is a hybrid, and the new Bentley Continental is a hybrid. And the adoption of those are actually pretty easy. It's not like Ferrari, where they've annoyed all the Ferrari purists. Lambo's kind of gone the same way. Whereas McLaren was always, McLaren's in a really interesting point in their time right now with the Artura and the 750S, because the Artura is the future for every supercar. But it's the mid-level McLaren, and the 750S is the top-tier car. And everyone used to criticize McLaren when they came out, because when, the 12C came out, it was up against a Gallardo, or at the time, a Huracan was just coming out, and then the Ferrari 458, and everyone was like, well, the Ferrari's got this naturally aspirated V8 and the 10-cylinder in the Lambo, and then McLaren's got this quiet twin-turbo V8. And McLaren's stuck with that, and now they have the twin-turbo V6 hybrid and the twin-turbo V8. 750S, when it came out, everyone was like, that's the most engaging car because it's not a hybrid. The new Lambo is a hybrid. Yeah. The Ferraris are both a hybrid. And it's weird how over the last 10 or 12 years, it's shifted to where the McLaren's the most exciting one to drive. And they carried that through with the hybrid cars, because they've always had this stigma of being the more reserved, more video game-like car. The hybrid stuff hasn't really affected the sales of that car. And people understand it as a McLaren and not this weird hybrid thing like a lot of people think about Ferrari. And it's brought a lot of new people into McLaren, and it's also retained a lot of current McLaren customers. And the Bentley is a new adoption thing for some people, but it's not we haven't had pushback like I thought we would. You have to explain it to people. With people who you were like, oh, they'd never buy a hybrid, and they're like, so I just plug it in when I get home? You're like, yeah. They're like, no. I don't have to take it anywhere? You're like, no, just plug it in and the car will recharge itself. They're like, oh, that's not bad. And so it wasn't that big of a hurdle to overcome. It's the worst. Sometimes I get a lot of objections. People like, I heard Bentley's going electric by 2030. I heard Aston Martin's doing this. And you're like, no, maybe. But that's not now. Yeah. I'm like, we're probably 2 models away from that happening. So I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing we've had to overcome over the last few years.
For somebody that's purchasing their first exotic car, their first luxury car, talk about how financing is different. And I dealt with this firsthand when I was getting, my first car, and they were qualifying me, and I was like, it's a car, guys. And it's like, and my salesperson, I got it at a Lamborghini Dallas. They did a great job. And they said, this is more like buying a house. It's not like buying a car. So tell people about that and the different kind of modes you have to go through, I guess.
Sometimes you'll get, at least I've dealt with people who have buying their first exotic car is, they had a BMW M4 or, a Range Rover or something expensive before. And it's not that different to finance one of those than it is an entry-level exotic car. Where it gets tricky is where somebody's like made a bunch of money and they can afford the car, but they need to prove that to the bank. And it's like, well, what have you had before? Well, I've only financed a Mazda 3. Okay, well, that banks like to do it in stages where they're like, okay, they'll start you out with a $20,000, $30,000 loan, and then they'll bump you up to like $60,000, $70,000, and then they'll give you a $100,000 or $120,000 loan, and then a $200,000 loan, and so on. And so it's hard for people to comprehend. We're like, well, I only had to put 5% down on this car. I'm like, well, that's different. That's a $30,000 car. There's a lot lower risk for the bank. I said, so when you do this, you have to banks love to see on your first. Typically on these exotic cars, they require 10 to 20% down anyways, unless you have a great relationship with a bank. And whether it's the manufacturer's bank or it's like a leasing service bank like Premier or something like that, or you've got a relationship and they'll give you a little bit of leeway. But sometimes when it's your first car, you might have to put 60%, 80% down on the car to prove to the bank that.
Wow.
Well, if you're talking about a $200,000 car, that $40,000 loan might be the most expensive loan they've had.
Yeah,
and so
I get it.
It's tough, but I once you're
So you're going to have difficulties if you go from, a Mazda 3 to a 750.
Yeah, then you're probably putting more than half the car down in that case. Even if you can prove that you could pay for the car in cash. Banks are just, you've never had a loan that high before. Why would we give it to you? But banks like to see that. And then the other thing banks like to see when it comes to finance, it's fine if you want to trade out of them all the time. But banks don't like when you do that because then you've opened an account in a different bank and they don't get to make the interest on you. So if you're going to trade cars all the time like that, you either got to put a bunch of money down up front so that you're never in a negative situation or pay cash for the car. But there's other non-traditional ways of buying a car that allowed it for you to switch out of the car every year or two. But traditionally, banks don't like when you pay the car off in a year or you trade out of it every 6 months. They like to have typically 18 to 36 months is a life cycle for one of these cars' ownership. So it's not uncommon to see one, people are like, why is this 5-year-old car have 4 owners? I'm like, well, they drive them for a year or two. They put 3,500 miles on them. They get bored. They drive something else. But banks are kind of the same way. They understand that nobody's going to keep the car for the length of the loan typically. But they also don't like when you pay it off really quick. Sometimes people will be like, all right, well, I'll put half of it down. I'll pay it off in 3 months. I'm like, well, don't do that. You're going to get penalized. But banks don't like that. They want to make a little bit of interest on you. So be fair with them. They'll be fair with you when it comes to financing the next one.
Nice, man. Question I ask everybody, and I'll end with, when did you feel successful? When did you feel different, throughout your journey or throughout your career?
It's tough to say. There was monetarily. There was, monetarily, there was a number I wanted to make in a year and hit where I was like, all right.
Yeah. We're living.
Yeah. But I think it was really early on where, there's the money thing and the items that I can buy, the cars that I've bought and buying a house at a young age, and that stuff's all great. But where I was like, wow, I've made it, I've done well, is I look at a lot of my friends from high school and college and I'm like, they don't like their job. They hate what they're doing. I don't. I love what I do. I wake up every day and I'm excited to go to work because whether it's I get to meet somebody new and make a sale, or I get to be enthusiastic, or I get to the 8-year-old kid that was me 17 years ago, I get to open the door and let him sit in a McLaren and watch his face light up because somebody did that for me as a kid. And so I get to do that opportunity. And that's where I'm like, yeah, the paycheck's okay and I do well for myself, but I love what I do. And that's where I was like, I didn't think I'd get to do this at such a young age. And everyone I work with is so much more experienced than I was and older. And that's throughout the country. There's only a finite amount of people that do what I do. And so to get that opportunity, I was like, wow, I've made it. And now it's like, where do I go from here? And I got to figure that out. But I love what I do for now. And eventually something will, pop up that allows me to further my career. But that was the big thing for me. It's like, I love what I do. I don't have to worry about I'm going to hate today. It's like, it's a new opportunity. There's something new to do, or I'll get to go do some fun event, or I'll get to meet someone super cool. Not a lot of people get to say that. And especially at my age, and a lot of my friends didn't get that. They're all doing, entry-level jobs to work their way up through some corporate ladder, which fine if they want to do that. But if, they got to spend the next 10 or 15 years doing that, then I'm ahead of the game.
Well, as we always end, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you thumbs up this video. My producer's going to yell at me if you don't do that. So make sure you do that. And then as always as well, clearly it is no accident that Nick is as successful as he is. Thanks for doing this, man. Thanks for coming. Thanks for giving us all this information. If you guys want to hit up Nick, I'm going to put his contact information in the description below, his IG. So make sure you hit him up if you need a supercar or a luxury car. He'll take great care of you. He's taking care of me. And we're out, man. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.